Making your own track confronts you with many peculiarities that are, depending on your perspective, either highly thrilling or spine-crawlingly frustrating. Maybe even a bit of both. And one of my favorite track features that only recently I really learned to appreciate are the double sleepers at rail joints. When it comes to connecting multiple track pieces, or more precisely the rails, there are three basic methods. Let me explain them to you by using my own models. The simplest one of them, and that's the one you usually find with store-bought model railway track, but you also commonly find on narrow gauge and especially on field railway track, are floating joints. In other words, the two rails are connected with fish plates, but they are not supported from underneath. And even though, especially in the 19th century, you also would find that with standard gauge mainlines, and in some places you can still find those today, they are highly problematic, because the ends are the most vulnerable part of any piece of rail. And under high pressure, which naturally occurs when a rail is used, they might bend downwards. But of course also environmental factors like the temperature or the stability of the ground can mess with the alignment. And that can create a significant height difference between the two connected rails, which is neither good for ride comfort or keeping the wear down, and in the worst case could even cause accidents. So from very early on, fixed joints were used. A fixed joint is basically any joint that is one way or another supported from underneath. An early version of that was to use longitudinal sleepers underneath the rail joints, which at that time didn't even have fish plates. That of course stems back to the very first tracks, which were made up by very short pieces of rail and used stone cubes with two rails met. But that got very quickly phased out in the favor for wooden sleepers, but at that point still longitudinal, with just every once in a while a lateral sleeper placed underneath or between two longitudinal ones to keep the gauge intact. That style of track, by the way, was the most common in continental Europe in the mid-19th century, but even combined with lateral sleepers you could find longitudinal ones underneath the rail joints, before it finally became standard practice to also use here simply a lateral one. In German, by the way, is a joint sleeper referred to as Doppelschwellen. The issue was that the regular sleepers are fairly narrow, so particularly wide sleepers were the preferred choice to take up the longer plates or chairs which would connect with both rails, but eventually it was found to be much simpler to just use two standard sleepers instead of a specialized one. And born is a double sleeper, or in German, Doppelschwelle. These two are usually held together by a long screw as well as a double wide rail chair. Then placing both rails of them and connecting them with fish plates gives a very sturdy connection that still has a bit of play, which is obviously necessary as the rails will expand, depending on the temperature. And while already the German State Railways used those double sleepers, they became the standard with the Deutsche Reichsbahn in the mid-1920s. However, even the double sleeper couldn't last forever. Welding technology progressed further and further and eventually was suitable for mainline use. So after the Second World War, welding pretty soon became the standard. However, the double sleepers didn't just disappear like that. Even on lines where the rails were retroactively welded together, and even though there would be a major benefit of removing the double sleepers in that process, as those double sleepers make tamping the ballast a bit difficult, as obviously access for the stuff underneath the double sleeper is a bit limited. Nonetheless, it was usually not done. And the reason for that is very simple. If you exchange a double sleeper with a single one, then you're messing with the sleeper spacing and would probably need to reposition even more sleepers. And when it comes to turnouts, might even need new fittings. So why even bother? Because besides maintenance, the double sleeper doesn't really hurt anyone. However, one thing that does hurt are the special rail chairs, which make it difficult for the two rail pieces to be welded together. Therefore, those need to be replaced with the standard single ones. And that is how double sleepers with two singular chairs came into existence. Or well, actually 4 chairs, because you have 2 lines of rail. You get what I mean. And today, you can in Germany still find the occasional double sleeper here or there, even though they become increasingly rare. They're still out there. However, where you usually can't find them and that is what I think is quite tragic, is on modern railway track. Double sleepers weren't used everywhere, but they were used everywhere in Germany and probably many other European countries too. But I guess that's the perks of doing everything yourself. You have the double sleepers exactly where you need them. Thank you for listening to me nerding out about railway track. I hope it was interesting. And a big thank you goes also to the certainly not sleeping supporters of this channel. Yeah, I know this was a horrible pun, I'm sorry. Which makes sure I can continue this channel, whether it be directly through YouTube or through Patreon, which you can also join for free, by the way. And if you want to learn more about my track making endeavors or my model making endeavors in general, I made a video where I talk about my field railway system, which soon will be 3D printed, which I'm very excited for. You can't even imagine. See you there!